Hello, everybody. It's Grizzly from Lexington, Kentucky. Around the world, coast to coast. We have a special guest today. Where we're going, I don't know. What rabbit hole? Have no clue. Which road? Which path? Have no idea. So we have a special guest, Zelda. Zelda, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, wow. How much time do we have?
All the time that you want.
Well, okay. So, I found out as a child that I was gifted, if you want to call it that. Okay. But there was a time when it was very confusing. Grew up in a very Christian home. My grandmother on my mother's side actually read cards. My grandfather was the water witch of our county. And he found most of the water wells that were around in the county and surrounding counties. My grandmother was a little on the famous side, if you can say that. I mean, obviously back then we didn't have internet. There was no cell phones, no any of that. A lot of it was word of mouth. And, she was called in to investigate places like Franklin Castle and so forth. So I grew up with this. But I had an experience when I was 4 years old with a doll that turned actually and winked at me. That was the beginning of the end. I mean, even now I get choked up. It's hard for me to even talk about. But that was the beginning. When I say of the end of that, when I didn't know fear from that moment on, I knew what fear felt like. I was 4 years old. And as time evolved, I went on investigations. Pardon me. I went on investigations with my grandmother, who was a psychic card reader medium. Went to different places. As I grew up, I started reading cards for others when I was 16 years old. And as time went on, I evolved, studied at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. I got my doctorate in paranormal metaphysical sciences. And I have also a I'm going to say, studied in theology, because I believe that there is we have to include theology along with what we're doing in the paranormal and in the psychic realm. So it's kind of hard to have one and not the other. So that's a little background, but right now I'm working for a wonderful psychic line. It's psychicsecrets.com, and I've been with them for a while now, and I'm just enjoying life and getting ready to go out on some new investigations this next year and getting ready to go to some paracons around the country. So looking forward to all of that. Just having a lot of fun.
Well, that's interesting. What kind of doll winked at you?
It was an animated, well, I'm going to say this. My grandparents, I have to give you a little background about this doll. My grandparents would go on vacations by themselves out west. And they were actually a hunting vacation. And they would always pick up something from my sister and myself. And this one time, I was 4 years old. They came back and they had this beautiful doll. She was, for me, being 4 years old, she was huge. She was probably 18 inches, had this bride dress on, bride veil. She was just so pretty, had this little rolled hair set and little lipstick, and she had real little pearl earrings in, and a little pearl, I'm going to say, bracelet necklace that goes with it, little high heels, all this other. And the next thing you know, my dad built these shelves that were at the foot of the bed. My sister and I shared a bedroom together. We had twin beds, and so we each got a doll. And the shelves were at the foot of the bed hanging because that's where the better toys and better things were that we were not allowed to really play with. And this was considered a better toy. And the next thing you know, my mother has my bride doll on the top shelf. Well, every night when I went to sleep, and we lived in this little suburban house, and it was the typical beautiful little home, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom for that time, and little white fence that went around the house, the typical beautiful little home. We were just a very happy family. And we were not in a very busy traffic area. Next thing you know, every night I'm going to bed, I'm looking up at my shelf at my doll, and I'm telling her, I love you so much. You're so beautiful. I hope one day I can wear a dress like you. I just think you are so gorgeous. And every time that I would walk into this room, I would look at her and say, I just love you. I think you're so beautiful. Well, this one night before I went to sleep, I'm laying there and I'm looking at her, and she had turned on the shelf. And
Oh no.
my mother, right? Right, right. So my mother had always, went in there and dusted. And so I thought, well, maybe my mommy turned my doll. So I'm looking at her and I'm saying, oh, I love you. I think you're so beautiful. And the next thing you know, this doll looks at me, looks down, and winks at me. And I'm going to tell you, even now I have the chills. I took one gasp of air and couldn't breathe. Tried to, and I remember my mouth opening to call my mom, and nothing came out. And all of a sudden, all of this built up inside of me, and I let out this ghastly scream. My sister got up and she was like, what's wrong, Zell, what's wrong, what's wrong? My mother and dad came rolling down the hall, and it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I mean, I grabbed onto my mother hysterically, could not even talk, did not even want to be near that doll, got us out in the living room. And of course, my mother calls my grandparents, and my grandparents lived, I don't know, 5, 8 miles away. And they were just there in a jiffy because my sister and I were basically their lives. And you were saved by the bell, right? Do you have to get that?
No. I'm not
Okay.
taking calls today.
Oh, okay. So anyway, they came, and finally I calmed down enough to hear what was going on. Well, I noticed the looks between my mother and my grandmother, and even my grandfather. And of course, my dad thought I was just going crazy and was actually talking about taking me to a hospital that night, thinking that there was something wrong. And of course, my grandparents and mother said, absolutely not. We're not going to hear this, nothing. So they had this little, I'm going to say, staged thing that they had to go in. My grandfather and dad went into the room, got the doll. I had to see them carry it out. They covered it up with some cloths and put it in a bag, and I had to watch as they took it out to the garbage can, which the next day the garbage was supposed to be picked up. So they took it out there, put it in the garbage can, and I still would not settle down. Well, my dad worked at General Motors at the time and had to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was almost time for him to go to work. And so it was decided that my sister and I would go and stay a few days with my grandparents until things calmed down and, all these other things. And so that was pretty much it until later on in years at a holiday. We were sitting around talking about this. And my mom said, "Oh yeah, that was really spooky what happened afterward." And I said, "What? What happened afterwards?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, you don't know." And I said, "Of course I don't. I was 4. Nobody's told me anything." The next day, when my dad went out to go to work, he went over to the garbage can and the doll was gone. And there, he dug in deep in the garbage. They looked around, and we did not live in a neighborhood where there were houses around. This was just like, so the doll disappeared. And we never knew what happened to that doll. My mother said she was frightened every day that we lived there, that doll would show up on the front step or somewhere around that house. We literally moved within 9 months of that happening because I couldn't be settled. I couldn't even go to sleep in that room. That's how bad it was. So that's when it all started. And then,
ladies and gentlemen, if you got that doll, I pray for you.
that was I don't know where they actually my grandparents got the dolls. My sister got one. It wasn't identical, but nothing ever happened with her doll. But that was it. Eventually, my mom took that doll too, and I don't know what happened to it because it was one of those things that just had to disappear. And from that moment on, I never had dolls around. I would have stuffed animals, but there were no dolls. I would just absolutely not. No dolls. And that was kind of the rule of the house for me for a while. And I had a picture, I wish I could find it. It's a picture of my sister and I standing together, and my sister holding her bride doll, and me holding a little horse that I would play with. And the frightened look, I was looking down at this doll, and the look on my face was just frightening. And that I wish I could find it. I would send it over to you so you could see it. I've looked and looked and looked for this picture, but that really came through to many, many times. And then it was just not long after that, I had another experience with someone coming to me in a hardware store where where my aunt worked, my dad's sister, where this woman came up in this dark outfit, dark hat, dark veil over her head, and we rounded the corner. And I was still very young. I wasn't even 5 yet. And this woman looks down at me and says, "Oh, Zelda, I know who you are." And of course, I was just like, 'cause she was pale and she just didn't look right to me. And of course, I came around screaming from this aisle. And of course, I said, there's a woman, and I thought she was going to try to take me. So I said, "There's a woman trying to take me." So they ran, and it was just a little home hardware store. And they locked the doors. They looked all around, and the store was just empty. There was no one there but my mom and dad, my aunt, and the store manager. And I think there was one other person there. And I described this person, and my dad and my aunt started looking over at, um, yeah, I gotta say, believe me, they looked together, and I described it was my dad's aunt. So it was my dad and so it was my dad's aunt. She had been buried a few years and came around the corner, and I was named after my grandmother on my dad's side. So I started having experiences like this, and my dad just couldn't handle it. I mean, he just felt like there was just something wrong. We went to church every Sunday. We participated in church activities. He didn't understand it. He just didn't know what was wrong. So it was later on in years, of course, I always loved to hang out with Grandma and Grandpa, that they would start telling me things, and they would take me out. We went to Franklin Castle in Cleveland, Ohio, went to a lot of different places. And then we started going to places where there were more activities. And my grandmother started teaching me how to play or not play, well, yeah, play, but read the regular playing cards, which is the art of cartomancy. And I learned from her how to read the playing cards. And of course, over the years, I made it one of my tasks to learn the tarot as well. And I also use the pendulum. And so to say I'm a psychic medium, I don't know. Grizzly, I don't like that word psychic. I just got to say that. To me, it's almost a carnival term. I was like, I don't like that. Oh, come see, I think fortune teller is a little worse, but I started really getting involved and interested in the history of cartomancy and the history of the tarot cards and what it really means and what's behind all this. And I just started digging. And to this day, I'm still digging, I'm still studying, I'm still looking. The more I look, the more I study, the more I want to look, the more I want to study. So it's brought me to here with you. So there you go. Lots of things, believe me, lots of things happen, but here we are. So
unbelievable. I can tell you that much.
well, I wish it were, but experiencing that sort of thing. So I really became a paranormal investigator during the time that I was I'm going to say, card reader, psychic, intuitive, medium, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just really the plain vanilla. I don't walk into a room and say, "Oh, hey, look at me. I'm a psychic. Come on, let me read all these people." You won't know the difference. If I'm with you, I don't announce it. I don't, unless someone asks me, then I leave it alone and let it be. And that's to me, that's the way I like it. I just like to keep it personal and private for many people. And I read for those who ask me, and I let the chips fall where they may. I think that's the way it's supposed to be for me, anyway, for me.
Now, do you leave it alone or does it leave you alone?
I wish. I have familiar spirits here with me now. Um, and so it just depends. I try not to open myself up for a lot, but usually it doesn't leave me alone. I get tapped on the shoulder a lot or whispered to, or, whatever the case may be. I'll hear, there's been, and I think other people have had this experience, that there's been, and I'm just going to say, an entity who will sometimes be in another room, and I'll hear my son's voice say, "Hello, Mom." Well, my son lives 2.5 hours away from me, but I've always heard that. I've always heard his voice. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Mom, come here, Mom." Or I'll have a Facebook Live, and the folks in my group will say, "Oh my goodness, who's in the room with you?" I can hear somebody saying "Mommy," and you can hear a child saying "Here, mommy, mommy," in some of my Facebook Lives, and it's a little unnerving because, of course, I don't hear it during the time, but across all of this equipment that we have, many do hear it. That's the funny thing. So every now and then, like, it just depends on I think it just depends on what I'm studying, who I'm reading for, lots of different things, a lot of factors, a lot of different factors.
Yeah, I interviewed a psychic over in UK. She lived in a 1780 house,
Oh,
and
nice.
a friend was with me, and he was a co-host, and I kept hearing footsteps. Then I kept hearing a man talking,
Oh, wow.
and I finally interrupted them. I'm like, "Is there anybody in the room with you?" And she's like, "What do you mean, Chris?" And I was like, "Somebody's walking around, and I hear a man." Oh, well, that's just my, yeah, yeah, he's there with me. I just got done
Oh,
doing
wow.
the session, and I was talking to him for before we went live, and I was like, oh. And Glenn was like, I didn't hear anything. I was like, look at the time, go back and watch this video. And you can actually hear talking and rumbling
Oh, wow.
and stuff going on. So yeah, so I know what you mean. I really do.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting.
It's a,
So
it's an interesting field to be a part of because for me it's normal. For other people that either don't believe or they get scared, it's not believe me, it's been very hard to date. It's been very hard to date, believe
I
me.
was going to ask you that question because usually everybody tells me that.
Well, there have been some that I've not even mentioned any of this to. I've because every now and then I've had to really back up and take a break, and I don't usually. Um, but if I have someone or if I'm near someone who has a real problem with it, I don't say anything. I don't, because to me that's just making it worse and encroaching because the first thing they think of is, oh wow, she's going to know what I'm thinking. Or oh wow, she's not going to know where I've been, which it doesn't work like that normally. I wish it would, but it doesn't work like that normally.
Angel Place on Earth. Sorry, ha ha ha, it came off wrong. I love you, Zelda, and you both rock with the show.
Well, thank you.
Appalachian Tales of Terror. Hello, Grizz. Hello, awesome. Hello. So yeah,
Hi. Thank you.
but yeah, I usually everybody I interview, and right now it's called Grizzlies on the Hunt for Psychics and Mediums,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, it's usually everybody that gives me feedback is I always had relationship problems growing up, and
Yes.
especially in high school and college and so forth. So, what have you gotten yourself into to help people that you enjoy?
Well, I actually teach the laws of attraction.
Really?
I do. And that is a big part of my life. And the website that I'm a part of, that I do psychic readings with, we have a section of laws of attraction, and I teach people how important it is for their words and how they manifest, because even all of this ties in together. It really does. But that's what I love doing, is teaching laws of vibration, laws of attraction, and helping people. I think just with life sciences and healing and getting back into the swing of things, because it isn't always that woo woo, I need a psychic reading type thing. It's
Right.
sometimes people just need to either vent, or they need help, or they need somebody to just talk to that's not judgmental. But I think it's very, very important what we say in our lives, how we say it, what we say, where we are. And I think that is the most important thing that there is. And it's how we are dealing with our everyday life, and how positive we are. And it really is the power of positive thinking. And through laws of vibration, through laws of manifestation and laws of attraction, you can actually heighten and raise your ability to be more psychically inclined. It's frequency, it's all vibration, and technically getting on that main frequency level with others that have in their life. So, now the other thing, lost objects, sometimes lost people, and sometimes connecting with others that have lost a loved one that just feels that they have some unfinished business. I don't like to do a lot of that because I do believe that we are not to call souls back. I believe in the story and the word about the Witch of Endor. We are not supposed to call a soul back. We're supposed to let it go and go on and rest. However, many memories, many loops, many residual hauntings, many of those things do remain. And sometimes we have to step in and say, you don't belong here. We need to get you out of here so you can go on. And so I guess that's a multiple answer question, Chris.
No, that's fine. That really is. One of the questions I have, it seems like a hot topic is your psychic abilities. Can anyone develop their psychic abilities? Is there a lot of interest in that?
Some, some. I usually get people who confuse feelings, intuition with psychic abilities, even though there is a fine line. Um, we are all born with the same gift. It's how we are raised that if we're told no, no, no early on, and thank God I had my mother and my grandparents because it was very clear I could have just gone in another direction and thought that I was schizophrenic or crazy or
Right.
any of those things. And thank God I had those loving, very loving family members in my life that said, hey, no, we think that you're normal. You're normal for our family. And so I do believe that everyone has psychic ability, but I don't get asked that a lot. I think it's people want to be psychic. They try to force it, but I think it really takes a dedication to enhance that if you're not already to that point where you can actually be psychically inclined, if you know what I mean. So I
Right.
don't get a lot of that. I do believe that we are born with a perfect spiritual DNA. That's my thing from there. And it depends on how we open ourselves to learn. And that's it.
What do you think about all these fakes and phonies?
About the what? I'm sorry.
Fakes and phonies.
Well, the fakes and phonies, I think sometimes are good guessers. It basically means that if you study human behavior, you're going to know how to react to a lot of things. But fakes and phonies can and always are, well, they're exposed. And it's very unfortunate. I think a fake and a phony if you get a hold of somebody that continuously asks you for money over and over and over and over and over again, like large amounts of money. But I think there's a fair exchange when you want a service from an intuitive or a psychic or someone. There is a fair exchange, and you should have that. And that is part of the laws of the universe. It is the law of, well, exchange. It's law of, so you pay for something, you get something in return. But it shouldn't be a astronomical amount. It shouldn't be anything like that. I think you can tell if that starts happening, if there is that rhetoric if money is the focus and not the person.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. So, in your lifetime, how is it going out in public?
Sometimes very difficult. I can't fly. I have a very difficult time for flying, and everybody's like, "Oh, come on, you'll get over it." It's not the difficulty of flying in itself, because I can fly, but it's being that close with so many people that it's very hard for me. I just won't do it. I'm usually, if I do, I'm a nervous wreck. It takes me at least a day to recover from a flight. I have a very hard time going to like concerts or crowded areas, or so going out in public. I quite frankly even have a hard time going to grocery stores or the big box because of the fluorescent lights I have a hard time with, and the people there that are around me. So I believe me, I love to go out. I love to go places and do things, but I have to be careful of the amount of time that I spend in those places. Um, Now, some of the paranormal conventions that I go to and plan on going to, it's funny, but I think it's because some of those people are like-minded, if you know what I mean. So it's
Right.
there's a different sector or a different veil there, if you will. But to just go out in public and um, I have a hard time being touched by strangers. I don't like that. If you would ever be with me and someone comes up to touch me or they touch my arm or something, I will back off away from them. I believe very wholeheartedly that energy can transfer very easily from one person to the other. And if you've got someone who's, well, having a hard time, or an addict or something, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. I know that people need help and they get help, but getting that touch immediately, that is.
Oh, Lord. We
Oh,
got
I'm
the
sorry.
gremlins.
My
There we
camera.
go. You're back. I
I'm
was like,
sorry about
here we go.
yeah. Woo!
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about
Woo!
this now.
Hey, there you go. You got your first
So
experience with
I,
Zelda.
I'm actually believing this stuff. Okay, I've got one that lives with me right now,
Oh, do you?
and my daughter does not know this because she's not living here right now. But it flushes the commode constantly,
Mm.
and this does not have a lever. This has a push
Oh,
button on
push
top.
button. Ah.
Yes,
Ah.
and I will ignore it all day long. And one night I ignored it, and I have a dog gate. It's made out of steel, and you have to push this button, lift up, and open it. Well, she was home one night, and it went crash like somebody kicked the hell out of it.
Oh, wow.
And I knew what it was, and she's like, "Dad, are you okay? Did you fall?" You know, because I'm on a cane, and I was like, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." And I'm sitting there thinking, I know what that was. So I get up and I go look, and the gate is sideways, and it is like screwed or nutted nuts and bolts to the wall to where it won't move. And then I actually took the paint off the wall when it was tilted. So that's how much force it was
Wow.
used to tilt it. Yeah. So
Wow.
when that camera did that, I thought, oh Lord, here we go again.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yes, I get it. I get it. I have to tell you this kind of scary story. Are you up for one? A
Oh,
paranormal scary story?
absolutely.
Okay, great. This condo that I live in is a temporary location. I'm trying to decide where I want to live in the world. So it's just temporary. And I live close to a college. So there was college kids that were upstairs. When I first moved in here, my son moved in. We had, I mean, it was just normal, just normal. And we started hearing screams upstairs, like in the condo above us, guttural screams, like scary, scary screams. And my son would knock on my door and he'd say, Mom, I can't take that screaming. We're going to have to do something. I'm going to go up there. And I'm like, no, you better not, because you just don't know. You don't know what you're getting into. I mean, I'm more scared of the physical realm, the human realm, than I am the spiritual. And I said,
Right.
I think that you should stay here and let's call the police. We called the police. They went upstairs, didn't find anything. Next thing you know, there were young girls falling off the balconies that into the backyard. And I would go out and say, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because at first I thought, well, maybe they're just partying. And they'd say, yeah, I just don't even know where I am, or, whatever. Well, then we would hear the screams and this thing would happen. And then all of a sudden, this guy would take out these big duffel bags from upstairs. And I'm thinking, whoa, that is just too much. So I complained enough to the owner of this condo, and he complained, and that guy was shoved out of here. Still don't know what's going on, but what it left was residual that went into my bathroom. And since I've been here and since that time, I mean, and I have cats, they're like my little paranormal buddies. They'll sit, and I have videos of them sitting by the bathroom door looking up as though they're looking at something in the bathroom. It's the hall bathroom, and I can see it right here from my desk. And it's one of those things that you just kind of have to think, did I just see that? Or a light will come on in the bathroom, or I'll hear the water running in the bathroom, or any of these things. Well, one night I was sitting here working, and my one cat, little Bilbo, because he's got long back feet, so he's Bilbo.
Mm-hmm.
Little Bilbo was not meowing, he was crying at the door, at the hallway. And I thought, what on earth is happening in this? So I started hearing knocking behind the bathroom door. So, when you have your bathroom door open, there's no space behind the door, the wall. It's just open. And I kept thinking, what is back there? And so my cat would walk up to the space where the door was hung on the door frame underneath the hinge, and would look in that little space there. He would look there, and he would meow and growl and run off, and then he would run back, and then the other one started, and they were both growling. And finally I just said, whoever's in there, you need to show yourself, or you need to get gone. You don't belong here. You're gone. I'm not kidding, Chris. And I'm sitting here getting chills. I keep looking over at this door now. Just believe me, there are times that, hey, I'll tell you what, sometimes I get a little unnerved and a little scared. I admit it. So believe me, between that space, that little, whatever, I'm going to say it's an inch space, I saw this little hand, now this far off the floor, this little hand comes through that space and wraps around like that onto the door. I'm going to tell you, my cats went wild and just scattered and ran. And I was paralyzed sitting here thinking, what on earth? What on earth could this be? And I just thought, okay, I need to figure out how to get rid of this thing. So I did a few things, and it took a little bit to get rid of. It was not an easy task to get rid of that one, but it took a little bit. The hand was the size, it was smaller than a child. So coming through that spot and wrapping the fingers around the door, that was the worst part that I've seen about the bathroom. But there's a lot of activity wrapped around that bathroom, and it's because the water attracts entities and spirits. It helps the flow of, and because there is also a concentration of electricity in that room, so you get your combination between the electricity and the water that helps that frequency flow, that also helps any entity that wants to manifest and attracts, and it is attracted to that. So, but there's a funny story I have to tell you too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm the epitome of that song. Love is kind of crazy with a spooky little girl like me. That would be me, right? My son always gives me this hard time. Who is gifted, but just doesn't want anything to do with it because he grew up with a mom, whatever. So there was one time I would go into the bathroom and I would flip on the lights would flicker, and he would go in there and the lights are flickering, and I'd say, "Son, do you think that there's some paranormal activity going on in that bathroom?" And he'd look at Mom and he'd say, "No, Mom, don't go crazy. We just need to change the light bulb." And that's the truth. So he has to like bring me down to this level, like, "Oh yeah, okay, we need to change the light bulb." But yeah, but that when I resonate with the bathroom stuff, I really do. And the screaming went away from upstairs, but I have to tell you that not long ago, that condo was empty. There was another student wanting to move in. The condo was empty upstairs, and boy, I don't know who was up there having a dance, doing whatever, but there was enough noise upstairs. And I would go out and go upstairs, knock on the door, and you could see there's a window right beside the door. You could see that there was just the whole place was empty, that people had moved out. Nobody had moved in yet. So there's definitely something that is attached to that condo upstairs. So do I hear anything now? No, not really. There's somebody else living there, and I don't hear anything other than them, and it's a different type of noise or a different type of something that's going on. But it's funny because it's one of those things that you think, should I have a guest over? should I have somebody over? And what if they need to go into that bathroom? What if of course they're going to need to do that. But it's you kind of have to stop and think, can someone who's visiting handle that sort of thing? I've had spirit follow me. It's kind of like, I just wish they could cook or clean or do laundry, and then we'd have a perfect setup if they could all do that.
Right. Now, has any of your cats meowed in the past 5 minutes?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the last part of your question.
Did any of your cats meow in the last 5 minutes?
No.
Okay, it sounded like a child said something.
Oh. Well, let's mark this time. I'm seeing it's right around 43 something, so I can go back and listen.
So I would go back probably about 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay.
Because I thought it was a cat at first, but it's like, no, it sounded like a child.
Really? Yeah. Okay. No, nobody here but me, myself, and I, and my little fur babies. So no. Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me. I don't know where the child part comes from, but that doesn't surprise me.
Now, with your abilities and everything, do you see things that you do not want to see?
Yes. That's a hard
And
yes.
what are those?
The things that I have seen, the first time I saw one is when I lived in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this was years ago, studying at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. There was a group of people and I who decided to go against the request of the ARE to not go out on our own and do any type of paranormal. That is way before we had any paranormal shows, before we knew anything. And we got permission to go into an abandoned building. One of the gentlemen that we were there with had a child, so he brought along one of those little Fisher Price cassette players, funny as can be. But it picked up more, I think, than a lot of the equipment that we have today. And I don't know why, but so anyway, we got separated, and it was dusk. It was getting dark. Virginia Beach, kind of the fall going into winter time, getting cold. I was walking over toward a window in this one room, and this building was more of a commercial building. It was not a home. So the ceilings were a little taller. Everything was a little taller, bigger, larger. And when I turned around, there was a black mass that was blocking the doorway. And it's one of those things that I could make out a left arm and a hand, and you could see the outline.
4601. Somebody's talking in your room.
Really? 4601?
Yes.
Let's hope they pay rent next month. You can pay rent, who's ever here. Okay, so 4601. Wow, I'm going to have to listen to that. I don't know if I want to listen. Do I want to listen? Could you make out a word?
It was saying something, yes. It sounded like an older female child.
Okay, I'll listen. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But back to the black mass. It was tall. I could make out the shape. It wasn't just it wasn't a mist. It was definitely a black mass. And when I say a black mass, that I had that experience in another one. And those are, I have never seen dark so dark. I mean, it was beyond black, dark, pit dark. And I've seen that. I've seen some lower astral things that you don't want to see. Kind of frightening, not around my home. I don't believe that there's a demon under every bush. I don't believe that, but I do believe that there are some that sneak around, and that if you play around with things you shouldn't, like mirrors, playing around with a mirror, or if you're using a Ouija board or any of those types of things, and you're not responsible with it, and you don't close the portals, and you don't close what it is that you're doing, that is an open invitation to say, yes, come on in. I think I've experienced some of those. I know that I've experienced some of those before. So yes, I have seen things that I would prefer not to ever see.
Wow. It's really interesting. It really is.
Yes, it is.
So how long have you been noticing these abilities? You said since what? You were 2 or 4?
Since I was 4. I thought everybody had them. I just thought it was normal. I just thought everybody had it. I just thought it was one of those things that and when I went to school, it was very hard to make friends. When I was in first grade, and this little girl ended up being my best friend throughout into junior high and into high school. But her father had gone to the same school that my mother did. And her father, after she was born, was killed in a motorcycle accident. And we were outside playing on the playground one day. Her name was Kimberly. If you're seeing this, Kimberly, hello, I love you. but she was outside on the playground one day, and I looked at her and I said, "You know your dad is here." And she said, "My daddy's dead." And I said, "Well, I know, but he's here." And just then there were some leaves because it was fall, it was September, we had just started. And there were some leaves that started going around her feet, really like blowing around her really, really quickly and then calmed down. And she started screaming. And she's like, "No, no, no, this isn't going to be. No, it can't happen." And I said, "Don't worry, he's not here to hurt you." Well, what happened? I got hauled into the principal's office and, "You shouldn't play a game like that." Well, it's not a game. And of course, my mother gets called and, so it's one of those things. And we lived in a very small farm community. So we all went to school together and then we ended up going to church together. And then we ended up, so we were interacting in everybody's lives for a long time. And I was literally told, put a lid on it. Keep it to yourself. If you see anything, whatever, do not. Keep a lid on it. You know.
Wow.
Yeah. The other thing that really got me in trouble on the schoolyard was a young girl. I'll never forget. It was just like yesterday. We were on the school and I went up, I looked at her and I knew something was wrong. And I went up to the teacher and I said, "I know I'm not allowed to say anything, but you're going to have to help her. Or if you don't, she's not going to live." And that teacher took me, by the shoulder. "Zelda, come on, you're going to the principal's office." While we were in the principal's office, that little girl had an epileptic fit or an epileptic seizure on the playground and ended up losing her life over it. And that oh, I get chills on that. And believe me, I was ostracized. Everybody thought I was a witch. I had a very, very hard time in school. A very hard time. So I just had to learn not to say anything, not to do anything, let the chips fall where they may. If I saw anything like that, keep it to myself. And that's it. Even now, it's very hard for me to go home to my old community. I'm nothing. There's no hard feelings or anything like that. But it's a hard task for me to go to my hometown and just be around a lot of people because things like that would happen as I was growing up. It was a difficult time, difficult childhood in that regard. And my dad, through this whole time, we need to send her to a military school, as if the military was going to knock that out of me for whatever reason. Or we need to, she needs to be sent off somewhere. So there was some resentment, there was some problems, there were, so it then as I grew up, we moved to another farm. You're going to like this one. And I'll try to hurry because I know you're probably running out of time. But
Oh, we
I
got plenty of time.
okay. So we then moved when I was in junior high to a haunted farmhouse that was in Ohio that was part of the Underground Railroad.
Oh,
It
wow.
was one of the most beautiful homes. I just loved it. But we all experienced things there. My dad did not want to admit it, but he did. The original owners that built this home, it was built in 1867 by a family called Harper. They actually had that still on the barn roof, where they had laid that out in different colored shingle. It said Harper 1867. Of course, we know that that was right around the Civil War time. And the they had a log cabin that they had built on this property, and it was a total of like 900 acres spread out. And so they had built this log cabin, and they lived in the log cabin while they built the farmhouse. Well, they were a very good family and welcomed uh, the slaves from the South coming to the going up to Canada. And so it was, we would start seeing a few little things. Of course, my mom was very intuitive, and I always said that she was like a little receptor because she had a gift, but she would never use it, never think of it, nothing like that. It was my grandmother who, just was like, bring it on, come on. But my mother just never embraced it. I'm going to say that. Um, so there was a time that my mother would go down in this creepy basement. Of course, little cellar. It was a cellar. It was not a basement. It was a cellar
Right.
that
Right.
had, yeah, that had the laundry downstairs, and she would go downstairs. The light above her, above the laundry, would go out, and it would be pitch black. And she'd reach up, and she could hear the light bulb unscrew. She would screw back the light bulb in. It would, this sort of thing. That was going on time after time after time until she finally just said, will you please stop it? I can't stand this any longer. And that was it. Nothing, that never happened again. And then when my sister and I would get on the bus in the morning, it would be 7:35 a.m. and the clock would stop right by the door. And it was an electric clock. And my mom would have to go over and fiddle with it a little bit, unplug it, plug it back in. And they even took it in to be repaired because it would not stop at 7:35 in the evening, only at 7:35 when we got on the bus. So little things like that. My mom would have straw flowers in a beautiful little kettle that was in the kitchen. And every morning after we got on the bus, she would go out and there would be a little blue one and a little orange one that was laying beside the kettle. So it was a poltergeist type of activity that happened. And then during the summer, because we also had farm, we had milk cows and chickens and that sort of thing. So, but during the summer, the something happened with the plumbing, and so my dad and this man who was the plumber, his name was Pete, came downstairs when we were all down in the cellar, and he moved the hot water heater. Well, when he moved the hot water heater, there was an opening, and it was very small, but there was an opening that was there in the wall. And of course, I got volunteered to go into that opening. And my dad gave me a flashlight and said, Zell, get in there and go see what's in there. Well, I crawled through there, and you can tell that nothing, I mean, nothing, it was an empty room, but there were like a shelf on either side of the wall, and it would be something like for someone to sit on. And so finally, I came out and told them what it was, and we did a little bit of research. And my great grandparents were alive at that time, and we went and talked to the great grandfather, and that was on my grandmother's side, my mother's side. And he was actually my great great grandfather. And we talked to him, and he said, oh, yeah, that was the Harper farm, and explained that they were bringing slaves through. And so we figured out through the historical society there in that little hometown that that was a room that they would hide slaves in. If anybody was coming through, they would hide them in there, and there was a way for them to hide that the opening. Obviously there was no hot water heater back then, but
Right.
they would hide that opening and go on from there. The moment that we uncovered that room, things started happening. We had all types of activity. I mean, this big farmhouse was 14 rooms, and it used to be a a boarding house. I'm just going to say that, a boarding house there. and it had a back stairwell and a front stairwell, and the front stairwell was just gorgeous. I mean, it was huge, but my dad blocked it off because there was enough rooms downstairs. We didn't need that upstairs, and there was no reason to even heat it at the time. And so we just decided to live downstairs on the first floor, and it was plenty of room for us, and that was it. Well, my sister and I would be goofing off, and we'd go up there and we'd see things would move. And of course, we had a cat that my sister named after this guy that she liked, so his name was Jeff. So we would take Jeff up there, so we knew Jeff so we knew Jeff would be attuned to any paranormal activity that came around. Don't you know, this one time we were upstairs and we were just horsing around. It was the summer. It was just, we had a desk up there, and all of a sudden, this little pencil holder on the desk fell over and rolled across the desk, but it stopped. And of course, my sister and I were like, oh my gosh, what is this? And of course, Jeff was really tuned to what was going on. And so then the pencil holder started rolling again and dropped off the floor. Well, it stopped. And then all of a sudden it just rolled like somebody just threw force behind it. Poor Jeff, the cat, ran over, jumped on the wall because there was old wallpaper there, jumped on the wall, hung in, meowing, looking up. I mean, it was frightening. I mean, we saw a shadow go past the door. My sister was out of there. she just ran. Boom. Didn't care. There I am, little Zelda in the background. Boom. My sister was like, no, feet don't feel me now. I'm gone. So I grabbed Jeff off the wall, ran downstairs. We were both screaming. We blocked everything off. Poor Jeff still had little wallpaper in his fingernails, his claws, from me grabbing him. And we never went upstairs again. That was something that was just really frightening. The other real big significant, I love this story. My sister and I shared a bedroom, and it was funny because every night we would think that our mom would come in and check on us. And there was one entrance in the one room in the back of our room, and then there was an entrance off the living room. We kept the living room door shut, and then the other door was open. And as any mothers who are out there, it doesn't matter how old you are, you get up, or your kids, you get up and you just make sure everything is okay. You make sure that, and my mom would just kind of sneak in our room at night, make sure that everything was okay, go back to bed, go get a drink of water, whatever the case may be. Well, we noticed this woman coming into our room every night, and we thought that it was our mom. And so then my sister and I would say, why do you keep coming into our room every night? And my mom's like, well, I don't come in your room every night. What are you talking about? And lo and behold, we just said, wait a minute, there's something walking in our room at night. We got to figure out what this is. So my sister and I made this little plan that we were going to try to stay awake because it was happening at the same time. We would stay awake, and then when we would see it, we would holler for mom. Well, whoever this was would walk in our room and stand at the foot of the bed. Both my sister and I would see this at the same time, and it was clearly a woman. And so finally this one night, we're laying there, my sister's nudging me, and I look, and there's this woman who walks into the room. She's standing at the end of our bed, and I say, hey, Mom. And just then she disappeared, just like that. And boy, the covers came over our head. We started screaming for my mom. And Mom comes in, and she's like, what's going on? And we're like, we just saw you come into our room. Was that not you? No, it wasn't. So upon further investigation, we found out that the room that we were staying in was the nursery. And the woman that was coming in to check on us was a former slave that the family fell in love with, the kids had fallen in love with. She remained there instead of going on up to the Canada. She remained there and helped with the kids, and she became the nanny, so to speak. So she was coming in to check on my sister and I every night, and that's who we figured out. That's the only person we could figure that it was.
Wow.
So that was pretty neat. And for all of us to be experiencing these things around this home was very neat. Very neat.
Well, that's crazy.
It is crazy. It is.
Have you?
But I'm just so happy to experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Now, have you ever looked at people and can see how they can or when they are going to die?
I didn't quite hear all of that. I'm sorry, Chris. What was that again?
That's like, can you see when people can die when you look at them?
No, because I and a lot of people ask me, when am I going to die, or am I dying, or something like that. Unless I get really shoved into that, no, I don't. The little girl on the schoolyard was the last one that I really have seen. There might have been a couple of instances where I've, pardon me, caught something before someone um, passed away, a warning. But no, I don't believe that um, I don't believe that's for me to know. That's up to the big guy. That's up to God. I don't think I think that would be an interference. I had a psychic one time that I went to in Knoxville, Tennessee, who actually told me that my mother was dying and was going to die. And it changed my whole perspective, because when I left there, I was in tears and I went straight to her house. I was actually visiting in Tennessee, and I went straight to her house, and I just couldn't stop crying when I was looking at her. And she just kept saying, "What is going on? What is wrong with you?" And it changes your whole perspective. And she did pass away. It was expected because she had a bad liver disease, but it was one of those things that I think it just changes us to think that, does it remove the quality of life? Does it remove how we think or how we feel of someone? So I have asked not to see that, and I just really don't like to get involved with that.
Well, nothing wrong with that. Is there anything else like you like to add or anything? Any more stories?
Well, I always have a ton of stories, but I think if we could leave that for the cosmic unknown, and maybe one of these days you'll have me back, because I'd love to come back with you.
Oh, you would definitely be back. Yeah, absolutely on that. That's
Okay.
not a problem.
Okay. Well, I've
So
got money.
how
I'm
does
sorry.
people get a hold of you?
Well, you can find me here on Facebook under Psychic Zelda Kelly, but mainly go over to the website. I'm at www.psychicsecrets. There's two S's in the middle, psychicsecrets.com. I'm on Facebook, so even you can just Google my name, Psychic Zelda Kelly. You can find me, and I'm pretty easily found. So that's the best way to find me. Just either Google me, or you can find me by doing a search on Facebook or YouTube.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? Zelda. You never know who we're going to have on the show. Very interesting, I should say.
Thank you.
So, I
It's
really
a
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Me
Oh,
too.
it's absolutely a good show. I learned quite a bit. I really have.
Well, good. Well, good. Good, good. Thank you
Been
very much.
excellent, excellent guest.
I have one more story I want to tell you, Chris.
Sure.
Just going to be a little quickie if I can, because I know
Sure.
you and your audience like Bigfoot, don't you?
Oh, yes.
My grandfather, being the grandfather that he was and loving his little Zell, when that first Bigfoot movie came out with Roger Patterson, I was a
Uh-huh.
young girl. I fell in love with Bigfoot. I just thought that was the ultimate. I wanted my grandfather to take me out on a Bigfoot hunt. And of course, my grandfather would hunt and fish, and I would go out with him with that sort of thing. But Bigfoot hunting, no, but he was really interested in it too. And he took me to that movie. He took the whole family to the movie, and that's all I talked about. Bigfoot, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. He actually found Roger Patterson and wrote Roger Patterson a letter and said, "My granddaughter is in love with the Bigfoot movie, is in love with you. And if you could just do me a favor, please, and just drop her a note." And of course, everything back then was snail mail, right? I mean,
Right,
we didn't have
right.
any instantaneous gratification stuff. And lo and behold, I get a letter and I get a box. And my grandfather calls us over one Saturday, said, "Listen, we want to have dinner. Y'all come over." So my family come over. And the next thing you know, there's this box that's put in before me. Now, this is heavy. It took my grandfather a minute to get this box in front of me because I'm little. I'm probably like 10, maybe something like
Uh-huh.
that. 12, 10, I think. And I open it up, and there's a letter from Roger Patterson that says, "Dear Zelda, I want to let you know that we are so happy to make you the honorary member of the North American Wildlife Research Association associated with Bigfoot. And since you love this so much, we are sending you some other gifts." And he sent me an autographed picture, a colorized picture, a large picture of Bigfoot in that famous photo that he had, and a plaster cast of the Bigfoot foot that he had.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's what made it so. And of course, who knows where it is now, because that's been about 100 years ago. And so it was so wonderful that I actually did a science fair project on it and got an A, and I was so proud of that. But I wanted to share that with you because I just have always thought that that was not only the neatest thing, but I had the neatest grandpa going.
Oh,
He would do
absolutely.
something. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was how cool my grandparents really were. So anyway, but I wanted to leave you that. Roger Patterson, rest in peace. But thank you so much wherever you are. And I'm going to listen at that 4301 just to see if I can recognize who's talking.
Oh, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be on Grizzly's show, all you have to do is email me at Grizzly, the paranormal, at gmail.com. Once again, that's Grizzly, the paranormal, at gmail.com. Don't forget, everybody, Grizzly is on the hunt for psychics and mediums. It's been a good day, everybody. Unfortunately, it's that time of the day where we must say goodbye. Until then, I'll see you later tonight until my next broadcast. Coast to coast, around the world.